All right. So welcome everyone to our civic dinner. I know it's like breakfast time, but still very excited that we'll be having this conversation today. So just so everyone knows, and I'm sure, well, I know everyone knows, but just to kind of jog everyone's memory, we'll be talking kind of about mental health and its like implications in the world of business and just generally with regards to like, kind of the themes of our class. So we have a few discussion questions that I think, we all kind of took a look at, and we can kind of just start with the first one, and obviously make sure that everyone gets to participate and share their ideas on this topic. So before we get started, does anyone have any questions? And if not, we can, awesome. Yeah, we can just kind of get started. So yeah, the first topic that as we discussed, we think should be important to talk about is on the topic of kind of colleges and universities and how, what their role is in kind of the mental health crisis, mental health in, amongst their student bodies. So for our first discussion question, I'll kind of just read out our statement here, which is that colleges and universities offer resources to students, but in your either personal firsthand or just secondhand experience, do you think students feel comfortable using and more importantly relying on these resources as a kind of source of structure and actual true support? And if not, what are some ways for universities to make these resources more accessible and also more comfortable for students? And what are some kind of strategic and financial reasons for the universities themselves on why they should actually be doing this? So whoever kind of wants to get started, obviously we don't really need to raise hands. We can kind of just start with whoever is interested and then go from there.
Yeah, I think like maybe a good starting point, and also to whomever is watching this, I will be taking notes throughout. So by the way, if you see me like typey on my computer, that is why, just to give a little bit of context. But I think maybe a good starting point for this would be to talk about like the resources we're exposed to at Emory. So maybe like discussing CAPS, and also something that I was involved with is like the Peer Health Partner Program. So kind of like creating a student resource, Teaching Health 100, that's able to connect you to an older student that might be there to help with different mental health dilemmas and different things where you just really need someone to talk to. So maybe like if you guys are comfortable starting there and kind of guiding it to how we've seen it relate to our Emory experience, maybe with our friends, and then kind of building it off of that to colleges and universities as a whole.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Awesome. Does anyone want to start? Maybe we could talk about like resources you're aware of.
I can start. So I was talking to my friend the other day, and so we all get charged in our Emory tuition bill for a mental health fee, which personally I think a lot of students around also find a little ironic, since I think our go-to resources would be CAPS, perhaps Emory Helpline if they need the funding in some way. But I think to me, those are the only resources I find available. And with CAPS, it's such an interesting place, because you can barely get appointments, or if you do, your first appointment is a consultation appointment. So even if you need immediate help, you probably won't be able to seek it in your first appointment. And then when you finally get to start appointments, personally, I don't know many people who have started like weekly appointments. Do you guys know anyone who have been able to?
I don't know. I don't.
Really hard, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I heard, I'm not sure if this is true, but I'm under the impression that you can only use CAPS for free like 5 or 6 or like 7 times. So it's not even like a resource that you can continue to use. It's like you have a limited amount. So I feel like that's extraordinarily limiting. What if you need to talk to someone like once or twice a week, and you're going to have to pay for that out of pocket at a certain point?
No, yeah, definitely. Also, Emory Helpline is not being funded this semester because of COVID-19.
Wow.
So I don't know where my mental health fee is going, which I think is definitely advantageous to Emory, since they still charge us all, and a lot of students don't look line item by line item in their tuition. But before we go into that topic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Audrey, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I also agree that CAPS is not very accessible given that it's like the main resources that students have to go to. And also just like with the mental health fees, I think it seems like that just shows that right now the priorities of the university is not aligned with the priorities of COVID, because COVID is actually increasing the demand for mental health services just because of how like mental health is like struggling in times like this. So I just think it's interesting how no one's pushing for that at Emory, or like why Emory's not really prioritizing that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I actually was thinking as well, like, I'm curious to know if you think like why you think Emory maybe hasn't like expanded caps or their other resources to a level where it actually could sustain like the, whole student population that would actually like, do you think that's kind of like financial or um I can't really think of anything else to be honest, but I personally just view it as like a way for them to kind of, or like a big barrier for them seems to be like financial reasons that they don't really want to actually expand the services. And so, what do you think, like, I guess students could do to maybe like increase their odds of like getting a more sustainable and like effective resource?
I think that's such a good point. And to build on that, like also, I feel like Emory's kind of trying to like check a box with having caps and
Right.
having these resources because they are so inaccessible. And so maybe like to actually kind of answer your question, Vishal, they would need to like have more of a commitment to students' well-being and not to like, you know, give Emory a bad rap. I know they do a lot for us and they are a great community and we should be grateful for that. But mental health is one of like the most important things, and especially with students our age between 18 and 22, it's like such formative years for all of us and like all of our peers. I think like having these resources and really like putting in the time and attention and care, possibly by like listening to student feedback about what they think would be helpful or going to experts and having mental health professionals provide suggestions. But right now, to me personally, it feels like a bare minimum just to kind of, you know, fill a quota and kind of reach like what every top institution has to have to be a top institution, because they need to say that they have these resources, but actually like meaning it sounds easier said than done, but finding ways to actually have an impact on the community and possibly like engaging with the community to find out how they could most effectively do that.
I actually think there's a couple of clubs on campus that are focused on like providing mental health like aid, right? I don't think I think like there's Dark Arts, which is like a poetry club that does mental um does topics on mental health and then encourages members to talk about that as like a sort of safe space. But I think there are probably other clubs that I just don't really hear about. So I guess what do you guys think about like the exposure of these clubs like that could possibly help?
Well, I think it is honestly really good that they are doing that because it does create like more of a peer-to-peer, like equals level of ways to be us, whatever you're feeling or whatever you want to share. But I also don't think it should be like in any means their responsibility to do that. Obviously, they're acting kind of in their own volition, but I think that it is ultimately up to like the university to be able to like single-handedly create all the support that is necessary for the students.
Yeah, I think it's strategic almost. Like going back to what Alexis said, like they're just filling a box and then the rest of the endowment and who knows what is going to like building other parts of the school as well as funding research for like so many others. I think that's like definitely the main priority of the school. And I feel like that was obvious when I applied, but I think like when they do at orientation pass out, like here are like the Office of Spiritual and like what is that office called? Office of Spiritual Life.
Spiritual and religious, I think.
Yeah. So I remember I walked across that table and they're like, we can help you like discover like more about like what's going on. If you have any stressors, like we can talk to you about that. And I was like, why is like the Office of Spiritual and Religious Life trying to like do the job that like CAPS does when they have to do like times 10 of what their whole mission is totally different than that. But I think they saw like the need to fill in that gap. So it's like all these other clubs or offices are trying to fill in, even like PHP mentors. I know a lot of people like who are pre-med, when they go speak to their, like, I think it's PHP mentor. Yeah. Or
Oh,
something
oh,
like,
like pre-health
yeah,
advice.
there we go.
Oh,
PHA. So many
got
acronyms in this school. Thank you. Yeah, PHA mentors, a lot of them talk about stress and like what the pre-med, like what med school applications are doing that to them and what MCAT is doing to them. So all these other offices are trying to build in like ways to support us instead of, the one main office. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And also just to kind of keep us on track, I know we have a lot to talk about. Does anyone else have some add on to this topic? Because if not, I think now might be a good time to go and transition to like our other area of discussion. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Cool. So on that note of transitioning, if we do transition to kind of talking about like businesses and corporations a little bit more, the first aspect of this is like, what work-related factors, whether it be like, someone's age or the intensity of the job that they're in, or even just how much they get paid, would you say contribute to like the mental health of an employee? But also more importantly, like, I guess how much of the responsibility is currently placed on employers to prioritize the mental health of their employees? And kind of comparing that to like how much of a role do you think they should have in ensuring that their employees are healthy? And so, kind of what actions or policies can companies do to kind of support their stance on mental health, whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Does anyone want to give it a shot? I know there's a very loaded question. There's like 4 questions in there. So
I guess I'll start with the first one, which is just like what factors contribute to the mental health of employees. And I think like there's definitely a lot and it really depends on the industry. But for example, like something that's been on my mind a lot lately is I'm personally recruiting for consulting right now. And so like learning about the long travel hours that a consultant entails, and also kind of like the intense work days between like Monday through Thursday that are like could go to like 2 a.m. sometimes. Like I feel like in that specific industry, it's like travel and long days versus like if someone were to be a sales associate in a store or something like that, they might not have this like travel or long day aspect that contributes to their mental health, but they might have customers that are super rude to them, or they might be lifting like 40-pound boxes and that's super heavy for them and it's physically demanding. So I think it just like really depends on the industry itself. And I think that like there's so many different factors that we could think about here that could impact someone's mental health. And I think like that's why these resources need to be so readily available, especially during COVID when like so much is unknown. And I think that causes a lot of like financial stress, and also just not knowing what's to come is stressful itself. So I think like now more than ever, having these resources in a business world is critical.
yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. And actually kind of go off of that a little bit, like what I've kind of noticed, and I'm sure we've all seen it to an extent, is like some companies or industries typically like trade off like, a bad like work-life balance, or, really bad environment that's conducive to like bad mental health, with like for example in like finance, or even in tech, sometimes like there's just like very high pay to kind of compensate for like kind of bad mental health, like a bad environment more or less. And so like I'm curious to see what you guys think about like what that trade-off is. Like for me, it personally seems like more of like a personal decision. Like the companies are in a way almost saying like, we explicitly know that you're not going to be having like a good time while you're here, but here's a couple extra $1,000 to make it like worth your time. And I think it's honestly, it's interesting that it comes down to like a personal decision, like whether you kind of want to prioritize like health or pay, or like health or career progression. And it is interesting also that like I think a lot of these companies still don't really offer many services that are like meant to kind of support their employees and actually like performing at their best and like feeling their best.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that too. I think it's an interesting phenomenon, at least just like more on the tech side, just because I know some people will work in like Silicon Valley. I know that they have really nice perks, just like they actually do have really great like health services and like they can really easily get a Facebook doctor or a Facebook a therapist to like talk to them. But I mean, yeah, like they get so much work that it really hurts their health. And I know a person who she got gastritis pretty soon after she started working, just because of how much stress she was under. And then like she found out apparently a lot of her other coworkers had also gotten it, but like the Facebook doctor just prescribed some like quick fixes, just like really heavy drugs. And so it's not so it seems like the company just they don't expect you to be here for long, but they just want to work you to the maximum while you're here. And then yeah, like they even give you some other resources that I feel like would be factors related to the mental health of an employee, such as creating that environment and community, because they try to make the office a home and they provide like a gym and then just lots of social things that you could do, but that people don't actually have time to do because just how much work they have.
Audrey, I think also you bring up a really good point, which is kind of like the thought of like being burnt out and kind of like which industries really promote that culture. So maybe that's something else to like think about with our discussion. And I'm wondering what you guys think about like which industries promote burnout culture and like how prevalent is that today versus like 50 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So go ahead, Veena.
Oh yeah, I think obviously the first thing that always pops in my mind is like the finance industry, just because I'm also a finance major, and I think that was like a big deciding factor. Like you hear a lot of students like, I can push through 2 years, like I can get through 2 years of long work hours, and then I can move on from that if I can just get through those 2 years. But then when you think in the long scheme of things, like yeah, 2 years, businesses give you like set you up for life pretty much when you do like grind yourself so hard, and the pay is great. And I think that's why all of you guys touch, like that's their biggest selling point to get people into these jobs, because they know they can give you a platform to then bounce off and get a better job, or they know that they've like broken you down so much that you're willing to stay for like a higher pay raise if you do continue in that work environment, which I just think is like the toxicity of all that. Like personally, I don't know if that'll ever change, just because it'll only change over time, and people who did like start that whole culture are still like alive and well and like are the leaders of many of these industries. So I think it's really interesting, and it poses me, after City named their new like woman CEO, I'm interested to see if like that does play a part in how like she'll tackle mental health compared to other like CEOs of major banks as well. That was a tangent, but I do think that's really important and might play a part in how City like tackles their employees' well-being as well.
No, yeah, that's like a awesome point, and it actually like made me think of like another kind of like I guess almost like a hypothetical, right? Which is like we have these like banks, for example, that really view you as like a resource in terms of like let's squeeze as much out of them in 2 years and then like kind of send them on their way. Do you think like these companies would perform better in the long term if they had like if they view their employees as an asset rather than a resource? Maybe like investing in them heavily and trying to get them to stay for the long term and actually like support them either physically, like mentally, all of that. Do you think that that would set these companies up to do better in the long term, or do you think kind of their existing structure would? I mean, because they all are very successful, obviously, so it is a difficult thing to think about. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I think that's a really good question. I think personally that like the success of these companies is based on the demanding, hardworking nature of these like young, fresh out of college. Like I will do whatever needs to get done to like get a good job after this or like because of this or whatever. And I think like this is so prevalent in investment banking. And so I feel like honestly, if you invest in these people and you try to get them to stay on for 10, 20 years, however long, that is great and that you could like find incredible leaders. But of course, not everyone's going to be like that kind of a leader. And I think you need like the grind of just people like in now. It's kind of like this is a very bad analogy, but like it's almost like factory workers, how you kind of just like push them to their limits to get stuff done fast and efficiently, and then when they're done, you kick them out, and like it's a horrible system. But I think it's like the way to produce the most effective work. And I think there would have to be like major reform to the industry as a whole, in my opinion, for that to change. I don't know.
No, I agree with that. I think like it does have to happen, but to a certain point, like if you look at startups, they're putting in insane hours as well, but they're putting in insane hours in different ways. Like they're not like grinding at like an Excel spreadsheet to like do something for someone else to present or something. So I think it's like the way you take like that, make your lower or beginning level employees like put in those hours and do all the grunt work in the beginning, because I think it can be like a flourishing environment where you do end up getting employees to stay. Like this summer, people in my office at the startup I worked at would stay till like 2 a.m. and then sleep in the office, and then when I would come in first thing in the morning, they would be like taking a shower in the office. And like they were happy to do that, because during the day we would play like card games, or like we would all get dinner together, and there were just many incentives throughout the day for you to like want to stay longer. So I feel like there's a toss-up between like getting that success and like already knowing like, hey, the system works. Like if we do have these people who just like grind out all these items for us, like we're going to stay a successful top company, versus like we can still be a successful top company, but have like people who would want to stay in the long term, who will put in the hours of work because they want to, and I don't need to incentivize them through pay. But I guess like in going back to the whole mental health side of everything, I think by having that kind of work environment, many people don't like need to seek out like a gym to go like relax for the day, or like a sleep pod, because like that's already part of the whole work environment where we already like support like taking a nap on the couch midday at work. So
Yeah, no,
I was
absolutely.
just to add quickly, I was thinking that also there's the issue of promotions, just because I feel like a lot of people go to these companies, like these big name ones that really like work them. They go here because they want to use them as launching pads, or like just like they're ambitious people, they want to move up. And so when they work here and there's just so many people that are like entry level like them, it's just hard to get promoted, and it's hard to give everyone promotions. And if you don't get promoted, they're likely to go elsewhere anyways. So I can see why companies would want to milk them if that's the case.
that's a good point.
Yeah, no, definitely a good point. Like it is really interesting of like a kind of like circling back to like our prompt a little bit, like given like what we've talked about, like what exactly do you think the role of these corporations should be in like promoting mental health of their employees, and also like on like a truly like consistent level, not really just by, you know, making a gym or whatever it might be. Like what should their role be in like promoting their like the health of their employees, and two, like what do you think the effects of that would be, and then three, like what are ways that they could actually really try to support their employees. And I can kind of kick it off a little bit in terms of like I honestly really do think it varies like industry by industry. Like obviously we did talk about that, like I think in finance especially, like it's so interesting that people are very like happy with being unhappy, like they know that that's going to be the case, and it's become like the new norm. Whereas and I think the reason that that is the case is like the work itself isn't necessarily one that maybe like a more healthy or like happy might be able to do better than somebody that's not. And I think realize that, whereas work that really does require like creativity, like in the tech space, is why there is so much of like an opportunity to kind of like be happy and relaxed, at least on surface level from what we've seen on the outside. And so I mean, I really do think more than like resources, and obviously all of those are important. It comes down to like the company culture of like having like managers and people who really do care about you personally and are invested in kind of like helping you do better. And I think simple as that. Like I heard a statistic where like, I don't know, like 80% of people hate their job because they hate their manager or something like that. And I think it really comes down to like almost like a trickle down culture where like very simple change at the senior level could trickle down into like a positive change of the company itself. So just curious to hear on those 3 points I mentioned earlier, like what you guys think.
Yeah, I think to like kind of build on what you said and also go back to Veena's point about the startup, I think like one thing here that's something we haven't thought about necessarily is that yes, this mental health and this care of mental health needs to come from the employer, but I think it also needs to come from the employee because as you said, Vishaal, I think you put something really well, which was you said people in finance are happy to be unhappy. And I think that like if you go into a job knowing that, how can you expect to like not have that in some way impact your mental health and in some way like if you're like, oh, I'm going to investment banking, haha, gonna sell my soul for 2 years, but like it's fine, whatever. Like, you know, you're probably gonna be unhappy and you're like comfortable with that, which is fine, but you should still try to find happiness. 2 years of your life, it's your 20s, like it's a huge time. So I think like that's one thing to consider. And also to Veena's point about the startup, I think a major difference between a lot of people in investment banking versus startup culture is that people go into it for the money versus with startups, a lot of people have a passion and drive for what's being discussed and talked about. And I think that having that passion really promotes a culture of positive mental health because even if you're working long hours, you're probably going to be excited to be putting in that time and seeing major progress versus if you're doing something for a manager that you hate and in an environment that you feel makes you unhappy, you're likely not going to enjoy your work the best. So I think it's kind of dually dependent upon the employer, but also the employee's mindset. I don't know if anyone agrees or has anything else to say on that.
I mean, I think that's like a great point, and like thinking about like, you know, passion versus like I think when you are passionate about a mission and like, a smaller team, like you get the opportunity to see like the bigger picture of what you're doing, and that also like incentivizes you to work harder because you really know like where your work is. If you are kind of like just a cog in the wheel and you're kind of just working on the same Excel sheet for like a month, you're obviously not going to be excited about like the work and the contribution you're making. And I honestly think like a way for companies to fix that is like even as simple as like maybe like creating like smaller team average where people have more of an opportunity, or like less hierarchy and like smaller teams where people have more of an opportunity to feel like not only like are their hours valued, like the work that they put in, but also like their ideas. And it's definitely like a challenging thing to scale up, like as you have like, you know, companies that go from like startup level to Amazon level. It's definitely hard to like maintain that culture as you go up and up like size. But I think that's maybe one way that you can like try to do it. But yeah, if anyone else has like any other ideas, would love to hear it. But also, yeah, actually I'll stop there and then mention the next thing.
I think going back to like with what Alexa said, like I agree that it's up to the employees, but like at a certain point, like I don't know if I would be like courageous. I don't know if that's the right word, but like even in classroom settings or like speaking to like a dean at the school, sometimes I don't know if I have like the grit to actually like make a change for my peers, because like I do feel sometimes like that I have to listen to like the hierarchy, if that makes sense. And I think that's just like growing up in the South, that's really like ingrained in my head. But I think like if employers just make the small change of being like, okay, I care. I think that's all, like it's so simple. Like that's why I'm laughing, because it's like all they have to do is take into account like, oh, I'm noticing this person is burning out. Maybe I should do like X, Y, and Z and like move someone onto this project with them for like just a day to like relieve stress or something. Like I think it's up to the managers to be able to like be those like eyes and ears of like all the people who are underneath them and be able to like help facilitate that. Because if not, I'm pretty sure like an employee will just keep doing what they're doing, because like that's what they signed up, like they signed a whole contract to do this, like they put themselves up to it. So I don't know, like half the time if people feel like the courage to be like, oh, like I need help, or I don't know, something along those lines.
So you think it's more up to like the maybe like the like your direct supervisor rather than like the overall like company policy type of to like propagate that culture and like make sure it's actually like effective? Because like in theory it probably shouldn't be, but like I feel like that is in reality the only way it really could work.
No, yeah, you answered it like straight away. Like in theory, I would love to be like, I love the CEO to like promote this, and, like say to all the managers in meetings. But like in reality, I think like for immediate change, it would definitely have to be like your direct supervisors.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, just on
Audrey, did
the
you want? Oh, okay, go
oh
ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, just on the point of passion that was mentioned earlier, I think maybe giving employees more flexibility over what projects they get to work on would make sure that they choose a project that they're actually passionate about. And then that would be a good way to like not to prevent burnout. I think companies already do this, like some of them do, but some make it really hard to switch teams that they don't like or like so switch projects. So I think giving more of that flexibility would probably help prevent burnout.
Yeah, no, that's honest. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Actually, that'd be a cool company to work at. But so kind of along these lines, also like on one of those like additional guiding questions here. I was just thinking about like, sometimes companies are put in a position where their profits are like directly contradicted with like the health of their employees. And like one thing that you can obviously think about is like, factory workers or like Amazon warehouse workers who put in like crazy hours with like minimal pay to help get these like, get one day delivery a reality. So what do you think about like, is there kind of like a balance that companies should seek to reach regarding like prioritizing, on one side health and then also simultaneously like their profits and their business? And if so, what is that balance? Because as you can see, like Amazon, their view more or less with their like warehouse or warehouse employees are like, there's so many other people that could replace them, so let's just work them to the max. And almost like that like investment banking comparison, but not nearly. I mean, this is way worse, is just that like, their people are viewed as like a resource and not really an asset to the company, or even like a true part of the company. And so like, what would you say is that balance with, even we can talk about like Amazon specifically and then maybe go to other companies. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Yeah, just for Amazon itself, I think, like you said, that like profit would be like it would work against just like employee mental health, but like when technically making sure that like these drivers are working in a more like safe, regulated way, like that would prevent accidents, and then wouldn't that generally just like in the long run improve profit?
I guess it could. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious actually. I don't know how they think about it. Sorry, Veena, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so I'm like personally, I think for a lot of school discussions and stuff, I've written a lot about fast fashion and like how that industry like perpetuates. But like I think going off of Audrey's point, if like working conditions are fixed, in turn, like overall efficiency gets diminished. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like the whole problem about fast
Yeah.
fashion. And it's like so easy to be like, oh, like if they like, have to wear helmets, or if like this is now a robotic controlled machine instead of like someone like a human actually having to monitor this machine. Like it's easy to say those small fixes, but the reality of like Amazon to actually wanting to do that, it's going to hurt their overall ability to say like I can ship this to you in one day. And I think that's
Right.
what's so terrible, because it comes down to the whole point, like as a consumer we're still buying this, so like there's no time to change like this working condition, because I ordered a package like through X, Y, and Z companies, so I expect that the next day. Like how do I stop this progress to help like make a bigger change for my employees? So it's honestly really hard, especially with Amazon's standpoint, to be like, if they change this, like stuff will happen because their profit will suffer in the end. And that's like, that's almost every part of every strategic like company's plan is like the profit, and their sustainability report is second in nature.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to, I actually wrote my moral circle, like the first discussion for this class, on how I thought with corporations, it was like a moral donut was my way I described it, because I felt as though there was like a missing central part of a company's circle, and that for me was profits. And I think like Amazon really encompasses that idea of kind of like, it's like first and foremost goal is profits, and then it's the, you know, the care of employees, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of, as you said, Veena, like it's so hard to stop supporting a company like Amazon, which has such a big impact on all of our lives at this time, and like to kind of like demand change, but simultaneously want the benefits that come with it. So I think it's like a moral dilemma that a lot of consumers are facing on a day-to-day basis, which is kind of like, how do we not continuously like contribute to this really substantial issue, but simultaneously get what we need at a cheaper, more effective way? Like, I think it's just such a dilemma. It's like a consumer dilemma that I think will be around for a while. And it's kind of hard to like say like, I'm going to make this difference when like you'd have to go to a store, drive there 20 minutes, spend $20 more. And, you know, like it's definitely a debacle. Sorry, that was kind of rambly.
No, that was
Yeah, no, of course. Go ahead, maybe. Go ahead.
sorry, really quickly, but like to tie it back, like we're making these decisions that are in turn hurting the mental health of like warehouse workers. As a consumer, like it's literally in our hands to be like, oh, shall we work the Amazon warehouse workers today? Oh yes, let's do it, because I need to get something fast to my door. And I think it's just a terrible cycle. But yeah, sorry, Vishal.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna, like, you kind of could say, like, from what I see, like, it seems like there's like three solutions. Like, one is to like stop supporting Amazon. Two is to have like more reasonable expectations of like what we want of a company. And then like the third is to like, I mean, I guess no, it was just the two. But like it just seems like it's maybe like earlier on in like Amazon's cycle, if we were able to like combat these types of issues, it would be something that had like grown with the company. But it's almost like these issues came as Amazon got bigger, so it's like very hard to catch them at some point in the cycle. And I think it's like almost a reality of like a capitalist society where if, you know, if we're willing to pay for it, Amazon's willing to do it, kind of a thing. So it really is kind of in our hands completely.
Yeah, and even
Go
oh,
ahead. Yeah. No, go ahead.
yeah, and even if Amazon changes their policy and they don't rush those orders anymore, I think another company is just going to do that. So
Exactly.
yeah, like it seems like that wouldn't fix it either. So yeah, I agree with you. It would definitely have to come from the consumers or some sort of like maybe like a government intervention, just like some sort of outside
Yeah.
intervention. But yeah.
No, yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I was just going to say, like, this is kind of sad, but I feel like the reality of this situation is like, we've let this go on for so long now, and it's really dominated so many industries that at this point, like, I don't really know how we could stop it. Like, of course, there's a lot to say and a lot to be done, and I'm sure like true reform can be made if we really like push for it, but I don't think enough people at this time are really like on board for that, if that makes sense, because kind of like what you said, Audrey, like if Amazon stops, someone else will do it. That's kind of how the world works. At this point, someone's going to jump off on an opportunity and like want the biggest market share if they can have the chance to get it. So I think like this overall goal of profitability and kind of just how far gone this system is a huge issue. And I think like, I guess the first step to somewhat changing this is like creating consumer awareness about what goes on in the warehouses.
Right.
And like, I know personally, until even taking this class, I wasn't aware of half of the stuff that happens in a warehouse. And I think like, obviously there's a lot we still have left to learn. So I think like the first step to any reform is just awareness and allowing people to develop and change their opinions. And I think like now more than ever, people are really open-minded, which is awesome. So I think like keeping that in mind and just creating awareness is like the first step to seeing where this could go, whether it's change and that Amazon stops doing what they're doing or they have better mental health practices for their employees. Like, I don't know what that would mean, but I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, no, great point. And like, I think we could talk about this aspect of our conversation forever, but just like kind of in the interest of time, I was thinking we could kind of shift to like our third discussion question, unless anyone has like some quick comments here that they want to add. Awesome, cool. So yeah, the last area here is like we just talked about kind of employees and like mental health, but now to like customers and mental health, which is I think honestly like an interesting relationship that people don't put that much. And to kind of like read out the question specifically, should or do corporations and businesses capitalize on the mental health of their customers to make a profit? And given that there's obviously two sides of the coin, right? So there's like the doctors and psychiatrists, psychologists who are like making money on like helping people obviously get better. But also there's the other side where, companies like, especially, today in today's day and age, like social media platforms who almost have like created and like facilitated the creation of a almost like society and generation of like teenagers and college students who are like significantly more depressed and anxious than past generations. And it's very likely that it is because of like the features and aspects of the platforms themselves. And so do you think, one, like that these social media platforms knowingly attempt to like maliciously capitalize on the mental health of their customers? And two is like, what are some kind of ways, or no, sorry, what are some actions and policies that either support or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, like for this, the first thing that would come to mind for me is just like the algorithm. Like I think definitely an unintended consequence of like an Instagram algorithm, for example, would just be like when someone, like for example, there's someone who had body image issues, and then that makes them really obsessed, and so they keep looking up on YouTube or like on Instagram, just like diet, tips, and then a lot of them are sketch, and then after that they just keep on getting recommended this stuff, and it's just not helping basically. But I think it's just hard for Instagram to, or like just like any other social media company, be able to distinguish like what content like is this bad for their mental health, just because they just think, oh, it's like what you're interested in, so you'll want to see more of that.
Yeah, no, of course. I think definitely one aspect of it, like Audrey, like you said, is like just the idea of like even just comparing yourself to other people. Like on social media, you see people even just, oh, like this person went on vacation. Like that's something that like I don't get to do. And there's just so many ways that I think it can like negatively impact someone. But then even on the other side, like based on like the way that the design, like for example, TikTok and even Instagram, like the scroll feature is something that like, I don't know if you guys have like read about so much, but it's like very carefully designed to make it where it makes it very hard to get off the app. And like obviously that has like negative impacts on your health if you're sitting on TikTok for like 5 hours at night before bed. And so like I'm curious like what you guys think about like either of those sides. Like I think obviously the idea of like the never-ending scroll is very, very intentional. That is something that they want people on the app for as long as possible, with no regard for like the negative impacts that it might have.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, especially your first one about comparing yourself to other people. I think a huge issue, especially with like young teenage girls, is influencers. And kind of you see like these really skinny girls wearing so much makeup, like they look really like what they deem to be like perfect. And I think it creates this really false sense of reality. And the girls think like they are not like thin enough and their face isn't pretty enough and all of this stuff. And it's just, I feel like it's a horrible cycle. And like, I have a 13-year-old cousin who talks about how she and all her friends try to like learn these TikTok dances and try to look like influencers such as like Charlie D'Amelio and Addison Rae. And my little 13-year-old cousin is like perfect. She's a little angel. She's in 7th grade. She does not need to be comparing herself to these people that I think create these unrealistic standards. And I think it's sad that it kind of like creates this environment where people don't feel as though they're enough. And I think like we're looking at a really interesting moment in time where it'll be interesting to see how people are shaped based on these exposures. Because I think even with us, like we were kind of the last generation to not really have this that deeply in our life. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't really have like Instagram or anything till high school. So I feel like it's going to be really interesting to see how social media shapes young kids and how that kind of creates like a mental health culture that will ultimately impact businesses when they enter the working world.
Yeah, I think like going to the very first question, like it's definitely every corporation's intention to like capitalize on these like small things about ourselves, like whether that's Pinterest, like if I search keto diet once, it's going to show me like a bunch of keto diets. It's going to suggest me ads like for me to like, you know, buy like HelloFresh or something in turn. But I think like Instagram with their new update, their whole purpose was to like stop capitalizing on that. So the You're All Caught Up feature was intended to make it so we're stop the continuous scroll, but it's only on your homepage, so it only happens when it's people you're following. So you can easily then move on to the explore page, which I tend to do, and then that becomes an endless cycle. But I think it's like very nice, I guess. It's kind of Instagram to like kind of care about us in making that feature, because you know, like as soon as you stop scrolling and it says the all caught up, would you like to look at suggested posts? Like I don't want to look at suggested posts, so I just end up closing the app half the time, or I just, you know, go to explore feature and do the endless scroll. And like TikTok started doing promoted posts that if you're on TikTok for more than 2 hours, which sadly like this has happened to me, there's a promoted post that comes up that says like you're on TikTok for too long, like please go to sleep. So like sometimes I scroll past that too. But I think like there are small steps, like they're realizing that they need to change, but obviously it's not enough because I can still like keep moving past that.
Yeah, and just more on products being pushed through promotion. Like this, I feel like the algorithm is specifically targeting a message or just like a product to its most vulnerable audience. And so like just that in itself can be really dangerous, because I feel like because I mean, you're basically promoting it to the person who's most likely to fall for it if it's not a good product. And like that could, and like depending on the product, it could worsen their mental health too.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like, yeah, there's not enough protections on that right now.
Yeah, no, that's like it's like, again, like I feel like Alexa, your point of like that whole donut thing, like it's very hard to break out of, like I feel like this circular cycle of, for so many of these different industries, like categories, whatever. And I really liked, Veena, your point about like they are trying to take small steps, and it seems like that is something more like apparently intentional rather than like a PR kind of move. Like obviously, you know, I've never seen articles on those features and how they've like kind of helped people. Like it really seems like it's something genuine. Although I think just like the nature of the platform, which is like the other aspect of what we were talking about, like just nature of social media, I guess as a whole, like really just contributes to like negative mental health for like literally the entire generation of people like our age and lower, which is crazy, and it gets younger and younger too, right? But so I was thinking we could kind of like continue talking a little bit more about social media, but also maybe see what other industries this is like a commonality in, of like social media is like a very good, very apparent and relevant, but also maybe like other industries where companies capitalize on like kind of mental health in a negative way of their customers, which is weird to say. Like how would someone patronize a company that is like making them worse? But it is, I'm sure it exists, and I would be interested in like talking about that if you guys are, or we can kind of talk about this as well for a little bit more.
Oh yeah, the fitness industry, like the whole point of like a gym or online platforms or like literally anything that goes into fitness, whether that's all these diet teas that are coming out or like protein powder that's like saying like you can achieve this kind of like muscle in your body, yada yada yada, is literally built on like the fact that we do not like how we look right now and we want to change it in some shape or form, whether that's like bulking up or like losing weight. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of like one thing that I was like even thinking about was, I don't know if anyone else Kumon as a kid, or just like classes, additional classes. And what I basically saw was like, you know, they from like a very young age trying to compare you to like everybody else at the place that you're going, like to literally it's a place to go learn. But the way that they like incentivize weirdly parents is to like tell them that your kid isn't as good enough as everyone else. And like these are things that I think really just stay with because the real customer parent technically, but like stays with like these kids for their entire lives. And so it's like interesting that that is so, almost like a system that is continuing, where like they are more successful by making their customers in a worse off position.
I think that's such an interesting point, and I think that's pretty common too, especially in people who go to like schools like Emory, because you're kind of in this culture where, you know, you take a standardized test and you have to be in like the top 99% to even get into like a school like Emory. Then within that, you know, you go to the business school, and I have some professors that are like, you need to be top of your class because it's on a curve, like blah blah blah, and it's like, I feel like it's just this culture that's being like perpetually worsened by just like, you have to be the top, like you have to do this to be the top, and if you don't, like you're not good enough. And like personally, I feel very fortunate that like getting to Emory was kind of like something that I chose to do on my own. It wasn't like forced upon me by my parents or anything, but like I think even so, like a lot of times parents kind of give their kids a push that's almost like similar to these businesses pushing like their employees. It's kind of like you have to do this to satisfy us. And I think like the Kumon example is such a good example of that. Like I feel like this is so prevalent in our culture beyond just like business itself. It's kind of in like all of our interactions. And I think that's what kind of makes us like willing to accept this in a business setting.
Mhm. Yeah, this actually, like this is a little like different, but I was just thinking like this also makes me think of apps that are made for to help with mental health. Just because like right now, I remember reading that there's currently a boom of just like a ton of mental health startups just to fill in that gap that COVID is creating. And so like I think there's a lot of gray area in that. It's just like, are these mental health apps actually helping people? I mean, because like they want people to stay on the app, right? So if they want to get better, then they would lose business. So I guess like I was just thinking of how like it's kind of ironic that maybe these mental health apps are literally taking advantage of mental health for profit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
That's like an insanely good point. Like I think it very directly relates to like the whole like I guess what is it, medical like research industry, like where a lot of like, you know, you invest in like not cures for, or not like preventative measures for diseases, but rather like kind of like almost like short-term fixes. Like for example, like I mean, this is like a conspiracy theory, but like, you know, talking about like how there are possibly like already have been like cures to different diseases, but people like corporations just don't want to like spread that out because they get more money by like treating people for them rather than like curing it like altogether. And I think that's kind of relevant to like what you're saying as well, as like even like I think medicinally, like obviously doctors and everyone, like they do so much, but like it is weird that like if they are successful, they kind of lose business. And so I think it's definitely something to keep in mind, like as you are like a patron of these types of companies, especially if it's like not affiliated with your insurance, right? Like something that you're seeking out on your own, being like aware that like while you are seeking their help, like it is something they might have like ulterior motives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Like, I actually had an experience once with a doctor who kind of like stretched the truth that I had like something that was like pre-skin cancerous. And I later found out that it was like just kind of like a funky freckle type situation. And he really like milked it. And then I saw a different doctor because I was like, this seems kind of weird. And I realized that he basically was trying to like charge me to do like a removal and like send it to the lab and all this stuff just for it to come out negative. When in reality, taking a picture of it and just watching it over like a year would have done the same thing. So it was pretty mind blowing to be in a situation where I felt as though a doctor actually tried to take advantage of me a little bit, especially because like that's my health. It would have left me with a scar. So I think like seeing that firsthand, and sorry if that's like a little like TMI, um, but I just thought like I would share that because I think that your point is so relevant, and it's crazy that like little things like that can be stretched because the consumer usually doesn't know what is accurate, and like something inside of me just said like this feels wrong, but like most people wouldn't do that.
No, yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I worked as, going back, but still relevant, this, I worked as a Kumon employee, and in like the corporates, yeah, it's a weird, really, I just needed a job at that point. So that's why I took the job. But in when we watch the video that like corporate, like Kumon of North America, like puts on for us, it's pretty much saying like, if the kid like comes up to you, like, I can't do this, I can't, like, be like, oh, suck it up, like go figure it out. And the corporate like of Kumon North America is literally telling me as like an employee to be like mean to these kids and to be like, oh, well, like if you can't get it, like maybe you didn't do something right. Because like as an employee, you don't even teach people in Kumon. Like the whole Kumon method is like totally this own like beast of its, I said the same thing, but it's its own beast. And like when the corporate is telling me like this is how I should react in situations and this is how I should like be treating kids, then when I report to parents, I have to say stuff in a certain way. Like it gives me everything that I need to say. So it ends up being like the corporation is just like molding employees and in turn hurting like the mental health of like their consumers without any care, because they know that because like the parent is worried on after I give a speech to the parent that they wrote up to me that makes it sound like they should be worried that their kid like couldn't do long division of like a 7-digit number in 3 seconds. Like they should be worried that their kid is going to like fail math in school. And it's like so interesting to see how like the whole corporate strategy like makes it so that the parent keeps paying for classes and keeps like making their kid come back even though their kid's probably like crying at the dinner table doing their homework.
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow.
Oh,
So I guess I think we have like a few minutes left. Like, thank you, Veena, for like. I mean, that I never knew. I was never made it far enough to be on the other side of that. But like, I personally did not have a very good experience. But like, I guess one like last maybe quick topic we could talk about is like, what are well, one like should companies try to even like fix their actions, or are they really better off, like truly better off, like capitalizing on their customers in this way? And again, I think it's going to vary industry to industry, but like you can pick a specific industry, or if there's anything general you think is relevant, like go for it.
Hefty
I also
question.
don't have an answer. Yeah, I know.
this is so tough because I feel like this is probably a really bad answer, but I feel like they should, but I don't really know how, because the goal of pretty much every business, big or small, is ultimately to yield a profit. And like you can try to make your employees happy, and some companies have awesome benefits and have models that we should, companies with less successful mental health capabilities should rely on. But I think like ultimately, I think in society, like we do need like companies, like we all want to work at companies so we can make money and like have, be able to like survive. But I think like it's a complicated system, and I think like the best steps would be to model after companies with really positive mental health services, because I think that this idea of losing profits is probably not possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I mean, I think I have like a bit of a like grim view on it, which is like, um, if you like compare, like maybe not like specifically with mental health, but if you look about like companies that are focusing on being like sustainable, or like only like locally sourced or something like that, it seems like more often than not, like, those companies aren't any more successful than the ones that do things the wrong way, So like it's very hard to see like why they should change their behavior if there isn't like a direct reasoning like financially behind it. And so I think like the only, like, obviously this is very theoretical and hypothetical, but like the only way really to like make this change is to like on the customer level to like support companies like Alexa, like you were saying, that do act in the way that we want. But then again, like if you think about it, like I'm sure every single corporation does something that's like either unethical or like some, you know, has practices that we don't agree with. And so to an extent, it's about like on an individual level, it seems to me like prioritizing what is important to you and then making sure you support companies that do those things. And I think if we ideally get like everyone who's in a position financially to maybe pay a couple extra dollars for a product, I think there's like an opportunity to kind of like make change in terms of like shifting the tide in the long term.
Yeah, and also just like I think okay, I kind of forgot what I was gonna say. Veena, you can go.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think the only solution is consumer based, and like I think it is definitely a grim view saying like all companies like do something that's partially unethical.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
think
That's fair.
there are definitely like I've stopped shopping and like ASOS and H&M and like all these fast fashion companies in the past year, and like I've, you know, I still got clothing on my back, like maybe it's t-shirts that I get from like SPC events, but like I'm still like, you know, fully clothed and like still doing something good for like the world, as well as like just downloading a Google Chrome extension that tells me like, hey, what's this company's like CSR and so on and so forth. Like, so I think it's only in the hands of the consumer, because like if we stop giving to the business, then they'll be like, oh wait, now I'm not getting profit, maybe here's why, and maybe this is why I'm going to change it. Yeah, I agree. There's no like immediate thing on from their side.
Yeah, I was thinking about like shared value that we talked in class. Like usually that's the best solution, or like that's what we talked about. But it seems like it's really hard to find in these industries. But I think if they could find that sweet spot and like utilize it, then there would be a sustainable solution. But yeah, before that, I definitely think it's on the consumers and on educating them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, Alexa, you wanted to ask something also?
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. All good.
No, that's fine. All right, so I think we're basically out of time here, but I think, you know, that was an awesome discussion. Hopefully maybe we can do another one at some point. But yeah, if anyone has any like closing remarks, we can share those now, but otherwise I think we're in good shape here. Awesome.
Yay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.